Hi friends, I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about writing your introduction paragraph or paragraphs because sometimes it's going to be more than one depending on what you want to do with that. So the first thing you want to think about is back to pathos, logos, ethos when we were discussing the three parts of rhetoric, because pathos is incredibly important. You want that human connection with your audience, and one way to do that is starting out with an introduction that has that human connection. So I'm going to give you three hooks that work, and we'll see how they go for you. The first one is called an anecdote, and that is a personal story. If you have a personal connection to the topic, I always encourage students to do it. Second is facts and statistics, and three are powerful quotations. So the first one that we're going to start with is going to be that anecdote. Like I said, this could be a personal example that you have, or it can be someone else's. So if you don't have a story that's necessarily connected to something like world hunger or homelessness, you can look at something else. Now, our major claim or thesis for an example is going to be there should be longer passing periods at Sunset High School. So here is my anecdote. I'm going to explain what it's like for someone to go through the hallways, and I'm going to be using narrative devices. And there's some different narrative devices you can use. One is show, don't tell. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Another one is to use vivid verbs. Verbs are very important in any type of writing. And we're going to want to avoid to be verbs, which are the basic verb that we use constantly: is, are, were, was, had, have. We'll try to avoid those. So I want to describe to my audience what it's like to be a student in Sunset High School, because I'm writing to someone who can change that, which might be a principal or a board member. So I'm going to start out saying, as I walk down the crowded corridor, I can already see it, right? The mob of bodies clogging up the main artery of Main Hall and One Hall. Looking left, I consider entering the maze of alphabetical veins, but that would only exert more energy for a similar time route. I dive in. Immediately, the limbs and sweat surround me. And I go on and talk about how I maneuver and elbow through the hallway. So here I'm trying to create a picture of what it's like to kind of get into that space. And I'm trying to use some of these narrative devices that I know. So as you can see, I say I walk, right? I use this idea of the mob of bodies clogging. So I use a strong verb there. I use an artery like craft, like a metaphor, like it's the heart of the school, which is one in Maine. I say there's a maze, even though not necessarily. And again, I go back to that vein and artery idea of an extended metaphor. I say I would exert more energy. And then in the middle there of my description, I say I dive in, a short sentence for effect. So lots of things you can do with narrative techniques there. The next one we're going to talk about are facts and statistics. You want something that is startling. And this one isn't necessarily startling, but it also makes a lot of logical sense. It says most people take about 100 steps a minute. 5 minutes, 500 steps, right? The distance between the T building and A wing, 550 steps. So I'm taking kind of this logic idea of how far it takes to go from one side to the other. And then again, I'm telling myself, I might want to revise this, and I use those short sentences one more time to kind of maximize my effect. The third one we can use is a quotation. I always say to keep it short, choose very wisely. And so for this example here, I have a quote from an article that I had researched and I'll be using later in the paper as well. And this quotation says, it takes the brain 10 minutes to reset its key 90-minute learning cycle. And this is Eric Jensen, and I'm going to put down where he's from. And this will be important later on because, of course, we know that Sunset High School has 90-minute block periods. So the second thing that you need in your introduction, beside your hook, is a bridge. And the bridge is crucially important, and a lot of students forget about it. What your bridge does is it connects the hook to the thesis or your major claim, and it is crucial. So I suggest using keywords from the hook and keywords from your major claim or thesis and try to connect those two, and I'll give you an example. So here we go back to our fact or statistics, and then I'm going to enter my bridge here from this kind of short little hook. I would continue before I would just throw my thesis in. I would say something like, this isn't surprising to anyone at Sunset High School who has lit and art class back to back. And then I would say, it's impossible. Then I would kind of go right into my thesis. So I would connect kind of that first hook that I did with what I'm saying. This is why Sunset High School needs longer passing periods. And that brings us to our third point that we need in every introduction, your thesis. Well, not every introduction, but for a simple one, yes. So always keep it simple. I could say something like, SHS should have longer passing periods in order to, and what's our whole point? Maximize learning in school. And then I might give myself a little note, I could use a stronger verb here. But I want to make sure that second part is broad. I don't always need to list my 3 points. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't, but I do have a rationale for that. So as you can see, an introduction is not too difficult. You need to start out with your hook, which is important. Then you have a bridge. And then finally, you have your thesis or your major claim. Thanks for watching, as always, and good luck with your introduction.